I've had the pleasure of being joined by Bram Swinnen. Bram, it's a pleasure to have you on this podcast. Would love to just get a quick introduction about yourself. I know you're a big voice in Europe and hopefully going to be just as big a voice in the US. So would love for people to hear who you are. So give us a quick intro, Bram.
Hey, Ashmedh, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. We already had a great conversation, or we had already a few great conversations. Now it's been recorded. So, yes, I studied sports science, physical education, a master. After I did a master in physical therapy, and after I did a master in manual therapy. At the moment, I don't really work that much with manual therapy, like the manual part, the manipulations and stuff, because I really specialized in the exercise part. And I know all the techniques, but of course, if you don't do the mobilizations, the manipulations every day for a lot of time, you don't really have that in your fingers. So there I combine it. I work with other specialists that are really specialized in those things. And I specialize on performance and the rehab. I would say my specialty is to blend performance and rehab. For me, there's no separation. There's not even a thin line. It's one continuation. Like loading patients and athletes from the beginning, that's a really important part. So the training part, the performance part is also for rehab. It's a really important one. I started working as a physical therapist and as a performance trainer. I mainly started in professional basketball. But at the same time, basketball in Belgium is not that big as it is in the States, of course. So I combined it in the beginning also with other different athletes, even like track and field, kayak. So, and also my facility for rehabilitation. I went 2004. I went to Spain. 2007. I went to Moscow, and I worked with 3 different EuroLeague basketball teams. After my last EuroLeague basketball team, I was recruited because I was working already in Moscow. I was recruited by a professional football team of Samuel Eto'o, Guus Hiddink, Las Diarra, like a lot of top teams, top players. And I switched to football. And since then, I worked a lot in football and consulting for football teams. So I still combine different sports, basketball, track and field, tennis. I was an expert tennis coach for the Essex Tennis Academy as a performance coach, of course, and also the neurocognitive part. At the moment, I have my own practice, and of course, we have with my team integrated performance training. We host different courses about different topics. That's a little bit in a nutshell. What I do.
Yeah, wow, Bram, you've been around the world. I don't think I've met as many people who can migrate from one sport to the other, from kayaking to basketball to football. And Bram, when you say football, you mean soccer? Because I guess in the U.S. side, yes. Football is American football. But yeah, I think you are what you would call in the U.S. probably a celebrity trainer. Or performance coach, not a trainer, but a performance coach. And the fact that you're merging performance and rehab, I think that's fascinating. I myself have had my history of injuries from ACL tears to whatnot. And I know that towards the end of your therapy, you're basically in a performance setting where you're basically training to perform. And even with the US model, where you start to do performance training towards the end, you're never truly sure if you're ready to go back to sport. I mean, if you look at the number of injuries that happen after you turn to sport, it's pretty massive. And it's pretty, I would say, disheartening. If you think about when you go through a progression of therapy, if you have a serious injury like an ACL tear, you're doing therapy for 8 or 9 months. And at the end of it, you go out to the wild, as in go back to play your sport. And the recurrence of injury is significant. I think one of the things that I'm always keen to understand is, and I know you've had a lot of success with this, but how do you prevent the recurrence of injury once you've let athletes go back into the wild? I think that there's that is the secret sauce that you have, is that your athletes tend not to get re-injured after an injury. So because you're in the space of performance rehab, help me understand, well, I guess first of all, how do you feel about the number of re-injuries people have, and B, how do you go about preventing that or reducing the incidence of that?
That's a serious question. I think till the end of the podcast, I will be responding this one. No, yeah, I can answer this question in so many different ways. I'll try to do it in a structured way. And indeed, like, we are used to have so many protocols. I'm not saying protocols are not, it's not useful, but yeah, you have to go and think beyond the protocol, because also one of those protocols, for example, is control to chaos theory. So in a way, it's logical. You start in a control setting and you make a progression to more like the chaos that you see in a sports environment. But in a way, that protocol is also completely wrong. Why? Because we, as physical therapists, and that's even proven by research, is the problem of our rehab is that it's too task-oriented. And that means that we're always focused on the movement, and that the intentional focus of the athlete or the patient is 100% on the movement. And we maintain that, for example, in ACL, we do this for 5, even 6 months. So a long period that we're working in a way that we don't use our body, not in sports and also not in daily life. Because in sports, when you're in a sports environment, the focus is on anything but your body. Because you're in a complex environment, you have your tactical patterns, you have to look, where's the space, where's the ball, where's my direct opponent. You have to think, what's the tactical pattern? So there's so many things you have to focus on, and your higher brain area has, your higher brain areas, they have to focus and work with that. And your focus is not a movement. And we teach athletes to focus 100% on the movement that they're doing for 5 months, for example, in ACL. And then you step on the pitch, you have cognitive overload, and that's scientifically proven. A lot of studies prove that. With cognitive overload, movement mechanics, they deteriorate. And that's where that control to chaos theory is completely wrong. It's useful in a lot of ways, but not in everything. So from the beginning, you have to also integrate the neurocognitive part. You have to integrate some dual tasking. For example, in the beginning, we physical therapists, we work a lot on proprioception. So I take the ACL injury as an example, because everybody knows what ACL is. It's a hot topic, and there's also a lot of research. But in the beginning, physical therapists, they work a lot on stability, proprioception, balance. But you have your eyes, so perception, you have proprioception, and you also have the balance system here. And so in the beginning, yeah, of course, proprioception is inhibited, yeah, because of the mechanoreceptors that are interrupted because of the lesion. So, and when I'm training balance, always in a task-oriented setting, that with my eyes, I can focus, I can use my eyes for balance. It's what you get, sensory reweighting. So you get a complete shift. Your eyes become a lot more dominant to maintain stability and balance. Then you go on the pitch. So you got a lot better in the task that you trained, but then you go on the pitch and transfer is zero, or is even, you even make it worse. Because the moment you step on the pitch, you need your eyes perception for the environment and not to maintain balance. So there are so many ways, even from the first weeks in rehab, that we have to focus a lot more, not only task-oriented, but we have to focus also on the environment. We have to implement dual tasks. The neurocognitive part is essential from the beginning, because we also, after a lesion, so ACL, a lot of physical therapists still consider it as a physiological injury, but ACL is a neurophysiological injury. And the neurocognitive part, we have to take into account from the beginning, because you have the inhibition from the motor cortex. So it's not possible to activate the muscles like before. It's not only the muscle atrophy that's a problem. The biggest problem is the uncoupling between the nervous system, central nervous system, and the muscles. So it's not just disuse atrophy, it's a lot more complex. And we have to use ways also to really reactivate the nervous system. So it's a fancy word, but we have the inhibition of the motor cortex, so what we call corticospinal inhibition. We have to increase that excitability of the nervous system again. And there we have to use neurocognitive techniques. Also eccentric training from the beginning. I'm not saying in muscle injuries, but especially in ACL, eccentric training in the beginning is essential to reactivate the muscles and to restore that coupling between the nervous system and the muscles. And I think in a lot of ways, we're still thinking too much in protocols that even now have been debunked by research. And I'm thinking control to chaos. So no, in a lot of ways it's correct, but we need to implement dual tasking also from the beginning. I'm not saying that it has to be in every exercise, of course, that's not the case. But if I'm doing every rehab session, every workout task-oriented in the beginning, then I'm making the problem bigger. And the other thing I wanted to say is, for example, we still think, okay, isometric training, then we go to concentric training, and then we go to eccentrics. In the case of ACL, the most important part in the beginning is eccentric training to restore that corticospinal excitability. And it has been scientifically proven that with eccentric training, within 12 sessions, you can restore that excitability. And with regular rehab, it has been proven some athletes, they still have corticospinal inhibition. So there's still not a full coupling between the central nervous system and the muscles after 2 years after the injury. And those are important things. So I can keep answering this question, but I think I will stop here.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. I feel like I've gone through a master class on physical therapy and this idea of decoupling of the nervous system and the muscle system or the muscles, I guess. It's fascinating. What you're talking about seems like it's just common sense, but I don't think it's really made its way into the vernacular of most physical therapists that I come across. I think the idea of neurocognitive training is relatively new. It's something that I think has been popularized a lot by individuals like Dustin Grooms. I'm sure you might have referenced him as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So
yeah,
that
really
research exists, and it's interesting to see in the physical therapy industry how long it takes for something that's very proven in research to make its way into practice. And I feel like you're so far ahead of the curve in being able to couple this decoupling. I think what you're trying to do is recouple what is being decoupled. And you're very successful at doing that. So in terms of results, what do you think has been the impact of this paradigm shift that you're instituting in your clinical practice? Are you seeing a faster return to sport? Are you seeing more longevity? I'm not sure if the idea always is to return athletes faster. I think the idea is to return athletes stronger, better, so they don't get re-injured. So I think in the US side, there's always this idea of, well, how long does it take to recover? And I think that notion is a little bit skewed. I think it should be more about how long can the patient do what they love doing without getting injured again. So help me understand, what kinds of data points are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, maybe to give you an example about that question, I see even to restore strength to pre-injury level, I see when I implement the neurocognitive part, I implement more eccentric work. For example, if you talk about ACL, that I gain about 3 weeks, more or less. Yeah, it's also individual different, but that I gain 3 weeks until the patient or athlete has restored his strength levels. Another example I want to give, because I rehabbed Stefan de Vrij from a knee injury. I'm talking about, I think it was 7, 8 years ago. No, it was a little bit more, 8, 9 years ago. And that was basically the moment that I really started to implement the neurocognitive part. And I was with Stefan for 4 months, even a little bit more. And of course, the last part of the rehab, I had other players that I could ask. So Stefan, he could play 2 against 2. Those things before he went back to Lazio. That moment he still played in Lazio Roma. But he went back after 4.5 months that he was in rehab with me. He was never in an 11 against 11 situation, not even close, not even 5 against 5, 6 against 6. But I implemented a lot of neurocognitive things. After the first training with Lazio Roma, he called me and he said, after the first training, he said, for 4.5 months, for 5 months, I was not in a football setting, in a soccer setting. So I was not training with the team. I was not in an 11 against 11 situation. So I was not in a real soccer setting. But today's practice, I felt I was a better player because my decision making was better and my passing accuracy was better. And he said that's all thanks to the implementing that neurocognitive training into rehab. So at that moment, 8, 9 years ago, you still didn't have, I would say, even any research or not a lot of research. So the research was definitely scarce. But when an athlete like this, because Stefan de Vrij, he was 2 times best defender of the Italian league, a top league. He was in Brazil, the World Cup in Brazil. He was chosen as the best defender in the World Cup. So when a player of that level tells me this, of the added value of the neurocognitive training, yeah, for me, that I already believed in it a lot, but that definitely was like, okay, this I have to follow through.
Right, proof is in the pudding. So obviously, great results from that. And so the whole neurocognitive training portion, it sounds very complicated. I think it's because there's so many ways of doing it, and there's so many elements of it. So when you talk about neurocognitive training, what does it mean, and how would a practitioner even begin to embrace that concept? Is it something as simple as having lights on a wall and tapping them? I mean, we're seeing lots of different technologies across the board. What is neurocognitive training look like to you on a broad scope?
Yeah, a lot. I can answer so extended on your question, but neurocognitive training is a lot more than just tapping a few lights.
Of course.
And I think you also have research that is saying, yeah, they want to disprove neurocognitive training because they do some agility training where the athlete just has to tap one light and one color. So there's no decision making involved. It's just simple agility. And yeah, of course, when you compare that with an agility within a complex environment where you also have to read the movement of your opponent, yeah, of course, that's different. But that's not neurocognitive training. Neurocognitive training means that you always implement decision-making and complex decision-making and dual tasking. So in the beginning, it can just be that you do some movements, can be simple movements, but there's a dual task involved. And what you want is not to full focus on the movement, but you want that dual task focus. So focus on the environment and that the movement becomes more autonomous. comes more from deeper brain areas like the cerebellum. So the moment that you step in a complex environment, the athlete is also more immune to a dual task setting, because we see novice players, so they can have good movement mechanics, they can be good in training, yeah, especially task-oriented training, but the moment they step in a competition setting, when there's pressure, when there's a complex environment, yeah, movement mechanics, they're even the result, like it completely deteriorates. Top athletes, they step into a competition setting and they're immune to the dual task setting. So their movement quality stays the same, doesn't deteriorate a lot. And I think that's what we have to, that's like one of the main goals of neurocognitive training as well, make patients and athletes immune for dual task setting. And I would say neurocognitive training, like physical therapists, we have been trained a lot in anatomy, physiology, but neuroscience is not really a part of a physical therapy, physical therapy university course. So that's why still, I wouldn't say skeptical, because a lot of physical therapists, they're really, they also know the studies, they really see the added value, but that's why they're a little bit scared to start with it, because you maybe don't have the neuroscience background, but with a simple neuroscience background, you need attentional focus, so something that requires a lot of focus. You need something like novelty, I would say, and good progressions. Because in the beginning, if I implement a novel task, but I keep practicing always the same thing, there's no challenge anymore. And to really facilitate the connection between neurons, yeah, it's important that we always come with variations, progressions, to keep challenging the nervous system. So what I teach in the course, I teach the basics of neuroscience, but I teach many ways, simple ways, how to start with exercises that are also sport specific and how you can adapt them. So it's not that complex. There are many easy ways that you can implement it. And of course, I regularly also, for example, with the goalkeeper coach, that was the coach of Courtois and many other top goalkeepers that play in Champions League at the moment. Guy Martens, with him, I sat together and we also developed some sport-specific neurocognitive drills for goalkeepers. So with a simple knowledge, you can develop a lot of new things. And of course, when I work with those goalkeepers, in the beginning, I'll tell them, look, this is what I developed. This is the reason why I developed it. And they help me tweak it. They will say like, okay, this really feels sport specific. This is the way I have to use perception. I have to think. And sometimes they say, okay, this would make it more sport specific. So in the beginning, I develop an exercise, I try it myself, then I do it one-on-one with an athlete, and then I go to a bigger group. I don't start with a new exercise right away with the whole team. That's suicide. So
definitely. No, obviously you titrated very, very effectively and in a very succinct manner. When you talk about dual tasking, just so people can understand the word dual tasking, I'm familiar with it, but some might not be. But is the idea of dual tasking to be able to do more and more complicated mental tasks while you're moving? Is that the idea? Is that kind of what dual tasking means?
That's not a bad prescription. I would maybe even say that the goal of dual tasking is that you can perform movements without fully focusing, attentional focus on the movement, but that you can move and have good quality of movement while you're also doing secondary tasks. For example, in sports, you have, of course, you have acceleration, deceleration, but at the same time, you have to read the movement of the opponent. You have the tactical balance, those things.
So dual tasking basically is a complement of movement and mental focus on various things that you're operating in your sphere of sport. So if you're in football or American football, you have a ball coming at you, you're moving, you're dodging defenders. So the movement has to be very innate while you're also being able to cognitively process everything around you. And what it sounds to me is that the lacking piece here has always been the disconnect between the cognitive rehabilitation and the physical rehabilitation. It seems to me that the protocols that we have currently in place focus very much on musculoskeletal rehabilitation, but not so much on the cognitive rehabilitation. And that's a big part of it because, as you've described, when you get injured, and of course, depending upon the severity of the injury, there's you also have cognitive deconditioning, not just physical deconditioning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you have to do both. So maybe, and would you say it's true that perhaps some of the re-injuries can very well be attributed to the fact that you, as a person or an individual, once you're done with rehab, when you go out into the wild or into the field, you are so cognitively deconditioned that you're spending a lot more time on cognitively processing things, and it puts more load on your physical well-being. Is that what causes the injury? Like, if I were to break it down in very simple terms, you have a finite amount of time to look at something, perceive it, and then you have to move. And so if you spend too much time perceiving something, you're not actuating your muscles in the same fashion, in the same speed. So speed of cognitive processing and speed of musculoskeletal movement have to be coordinated. And is it the lack of coordination between mental processing and physical movement that causes the injury? Is that kind of the nexus of the injury pattern?
I know you asked the questions, but let me ask one question. If you had to name, one element what's essential, I know there are many, but one element that's really essential for sports, what would you name?
The most essential element to me is durability. When I say durability, it means the ability to do a sport for a long period of time without getting exhausted.
Yeah.
So stamina. So maybe it's stamina.
I'm gonna say wrong.
Oh, strike one. What's the answer, Bram?
No, but of course there are many different elements. It's not to have a discussion what's the most important, but for me, if I had to name one thing in sports, split-second decision-making. Like, in a really short amount of time, taking the correct decision.
Yeah.
And I will say why for me that's more important than stamina. Yeah. I will also base it on research, because it's scientifically proven that players with good cognitive abilities, yeah, they have better movement mechanics and they have less injuries. So good decision-making is better movement, is less injuries. Good decision-making is better movement economy, is more stamina. Because you can have all the stamina in the world, you can be like conditioning-wise the best athlete there is, but if you have bad decision-making and your movement economy is not that good, you won't keep up with the best athletes, even though you're conditioning-wise you're great. So for me, split-second decision-making, if I have to name one thing, for me, I would name split-second decision-making. I'm gonna say another thing. I'm gonna give an example. You have, for example, piano players. Yeah? You have piano players that broke their hand. And they made a scan at the moment that they went to the hospital, yeah, for research, like professional piano players. They made a scan, and then of course they're in a cast, so for 3-4 weeks they cannot use their hand, and then they make a functional MRI scan of the brain again after 3-4 weeks, and what do they see? That the representation of the hand in the brain is completely changed. The area that commands the hand is a lot smaller. And where before areas that commanded the hand, they're taken in by other parts, by other parts. So the brain is really flexible. It's more plastic than our body. And split-second decision-making is so important. It's what best athletes, in a split second, they can take the right decision. And if an ACL for 5 months, you're not doing split-second decisions, then you come back. Of course, your brain has to adapt. And that doesn't go in a 1 or 2 weeks. So if you never implemented that split-second decision-making, that neurocognitive training, for 5 months, your brain changed. Then in training, your decision-making is off. It's not as good as it was. It has an effect on movement mechanics, movement economy. And that's why athletes, because now in professional teams, you have a whole staff. I think 90% of the athletes, when they have a serious injury, they come back in a better physical state than they were before. I seriously think that. And also when I speak to professionals, they say, okay, that's also what we think. But a lot of times you see that those athletes still don't perform the first months in a sport-specific setting. And for me, that's decision-making. Decision-making that's a little bit off, which has an effect of movement mechanics, movement economy. And instead of always being anticipating, you're always running behind. That costs more energy, and your results, you're not performing, and you fatigue earlier.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, wow. That's very insightful. I mean, that is true. I mean, that's the cornerstone. I mean, the example of the piano player is interesting, how the brain is very plastic, as you said, and it does shrink if it's not used. With the piano player, I'm curious, did they do a rescan after the piano player started replaying? Did they show the enlargement of the area that's activated the brain?
You have a few studies that talk about this, but basically it's like the representation of the hand completely changed. It got a lot smaller. The brain area that reminds the hand got a lot smaller.
And I'm sure the research shows that once you do the neurocognitive training or reconditioning, that the portion of the brain that was deactivated becomes reactivated as it was before.
In the case of the piano player, I don't think there are any studies in reactivating that. That was not the scope that study. But in general, for me, that split-second decision-making is so important. So it's something, working memory. The working memory, the bigger the capacity of your working memory, the better you are in split-second decision-making. So you never have enough capacity to perform in sports. The bigger the capacity, the better. And you see that players with a bigger working memory capacity, that they also control better their emotions during the game. And they can also better focus on the tactical guidelines from the coach. Because some players, they're in a video session and they have the tactical guidelines, and then they step into a game with a lot of pressure. Pressure reduces the working capacity memory by about 30%. The working memory capacity by about 30%. So they step on the pitch and suddenly it's like they were never in the video session. And then it's like the coach that he didn't pay attention. No, it's not about paying attention. He just can't translate it from a video session to a game. You need to have steps in between. Right. So neurocognitive training and dual tasking will increase the capacity of the working memory, and that will have a lot of overflow, a positive overflow to game performance, to performance on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, working memory is just crucial to everybody's existence, whether you're in the corporate world or the sports world. I mean, that's the bottom line, and you're right. I think when you're in the academic or the working environment, you're constantly improving your working memory because you're using those muscles. But you're right, for elite athletes or athletes in general, I think even for a weekend warrior who plays pickleball or tennis or whatever it may be, Once you get injured, you definitely have a disconnect, and you lose a portion of that working memory when it comes to sport. And to recondition that is so critically important. Well, that's insightful. So I learned something. Thank you, bro.
You're welcome, my friend.
Forget stamina. Good stuff. Bram, we've covered a lot of very fascinating stuff around neurocognitive training. I know you'll probably be in the US sometime in the near future. I know you do a lot of education. We'll, be happy to suggest dates when you're back in the US. But Bram, I know you do a lot of educational courses in Europe, and some probably online in the US as well. And you're in the US probably in the summertime, from July to August, and sometimes during Easter. And you're certainly, I think, available through remote consultations as well. If somebody wants to reach out to you and learn more about your courses or getting a chance to speak to you directly, what's the best method for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah, that's a question I didn't expect, but yeah, my schedule is quite busy. So sometimes on LinkedIn, I get questions. If I can, of course, I will answer. I also have my team. They support me also in the connection with people. The real technical questions I try to answer myself, if possible. Of course, don't ask me to make on LinkedIn to design a training schedule or rehab schedule for your athlete. I don't think that's my job. But we also had people from the US fly over to the courses in Europe. So mostly every course, we have 1 or 2 people from the US. And in Europe, we also, together with my team, we also do a lot of consulting for Olympic federations, for professional teams. So we try to, any demand, we'll try to handle also within the team.
Gotcha. Sounds good, Bram. I appreciate the time today.
I'm going to get my phone number in here.
No, I know that you do a lot of great work, and the US audience has yet to sort of discover you, Bram. So we're looking forward to having a lot more of these sessions. So we'll be chatting more, and I want people to be aware that you are accessible, and that we will have some future courses and webinars that we'll be doing that people can take advantage of. Because I think what you're doing is really is phenomenal. It's very cutting edge. And I think that industry has to shift more towards understanding the need for neurocognitive training. It's vital. The idea of having the split decision making, ingrained in the protocol for recovery, and not just recovery, but really just performance enhancement in general. If you're an athlete, this level of split decision making, of enhancing your working memory, I think is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing. It's a constant, continuous effort. That if you focus on, makes good players great and great players legends, probably.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast. It was great talk, like always. So looking forward for what's next to come.
Sure.